Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining our 1950s Fun Chat today. We hope that you will enjoy this episode, number 39, Jackie, and we're keep moving forward with bringing to life the memories of the 1950s. With Father's Day fast approaching, June 19th, folks, we wanted to honor our dad today, Jack. Justice was his given name, Pfeiffer from Minoka, North Dakota. And in this broadcast, he was so influential in our lives. And we hope that you will also remember the special guy in your life, the special man, whether it's your dad, your husband, your significant other, your partner for life, your uncle, your son, whoever who would enjoy learning more about our story of growing up on the prairies of North Dakota in the 1950s with our mom and dad, Jack and Eudora Pfeiffer. And today is especially important to us because it is the wedding anniversary date of our mom and dad, June 6th. They were married June 6th, 1943. Is that correct, Jackie?
Correct.
Yes. Yes. And so, of course, they would have been married many, many years by now. And unfortunately, we can't celebrate with them here on Earth, but we do honor dad and mom today, and especially dad in thinking about Father's Day. So if you need one of these books, While the Windmill Watched, Jackie can tell you more about that. Right, Jackie?
Right. And what I will do is direct our readers, our listeners, and our viewers to the bottom of this screen where you see that purple banner and the title of our website, www.whilethewindmillwatch.com. That's where you can find all sorts of information about Janine and me, about the book, about where to purchase it, about previous fun chats, and you can just click on those and take a look to see what we've been recording previously. Also, I'd like to have you note at the top right-hand corner, there's our beautiful book up there. It's called While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, and it is on the silhouettes are on a background of a beautiful North Dakota sunset. And in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a little white spot that maybe you can't identify exactly what that is, but it is our 2022 Independent Press Award that we won in the category of regional as a distinguished favorite.
Whoa.
Now, books from all over the world were entered into this contest, and we were just blown away and so honored to have this award bestowed upon our book. So tell us what's happening now, Janine.
Okay, what we have done is gone through our book and selected certain segments of it in which dad has been highlighted, or our work with dad, or dad's life has been highlighted, just so that you can get to know our father a little bit better. He was a great man, and many people in the community so appreciated his leadership style, his friendliness, his care for his neighbors and friends, and as well as his love for his wife and for Jackie and me. We are so blessed to have had Jack Pfeiffer as our dad. And to start out with, Jackie, do you have a quote that you want from the book that you would like to talk about with the value of being kind?
Okay, I have several quotes, but I'll start with this one on page 238, graph
Mhm.
2, beginning with line 3. And this is what it says. Janine and I watched and learned as we saw Dad demonstrate the value of being kind to all and about helping those less fortunate. There was no fanfare, no bragging. If Dad saw a family in need, he helped those less fortunate, either anonymously or directly, but with discretion so as not to cause embarrassment to the receivers.
Mhm.
One thing that comes to my mind is this. Dad was a 4-H leader, and there was a family in the community who just not could not afford to have a lamb as a project.
Mm.
So Dad, I don't know how many times he did this. I don't know the specifics, but I do remember when he did that, I thought, well, how kind. He gave this family either one lamb or two lambs because they had two children who were 4-H age.
Mhm.
And they were able then to participate in 4-H. He gave
Mhm.
them the lamb, and they then raised it and gained the learning experiences of taking care of a lamb, of writing down records of the feed that was given and and the um, expenses that were incurred, and you just gave them an opportunity for growth by giving them this lamb.
I think it's interesting you've said that because I didn't recall that situation. I don't know if I was too young to remember
Mm-hmm,
that, but thank you for bringing that to mind.
mm-hmm,
One thing that I recall from Dad's kindness was that there was a family in the community who was on hard times and they needed food to feed their children. Dad had a small locker business, what you would say he fed out cattle in, and then other people in the community and even in Bismarck then would order meat from him. This family could not afford anything like that. And so, out of the graciousness of Dad's heart, he had a beef processed for them and gave it to them so that they could have nourishment, at least have protein for their family.
mm-hmm.
Again, that was something that I really has made an imprint on my mind for so many years was his kindness. And you know, it's interesting, Jackie, because we lived in that environment. We were always very well cared for. Mom and dad were very conservative in their spending habits and knew how to make a penny stretch. And because of that, we never felt that we were wanting for anything. Did you feel that way?
Not at all. I felt we
Mhm.
were wealthy, I guess,
Yes.
because of it. There
Yes.
wasn't
But
any talk of any stress of finances. But as adults, we now have looked back and noted that probably, as you said, they know how to stretch a penny and a dollar, and they did that.
mhm, mhm. And sometimes when later on in years, I thought, how did they make that work? Because, but they did. And we can be very, very grateful for that. I want to move on to a part of the book on page 220 and where I'm speaking. And maybe we should tell our friends in the audience that our book, While the Windmill Watched, is spoken in four voices. It's spoken in some of the copy is Jackie speaking, some of it is me speaking, some of it we speak together as the sisters. And the unique fourth voice in the book is that of the windmill that stood in the center of our barnyard and observed time pass. So it observed Jackie and me growing as children. It observed our community. It observed, because it was so tall, it could see forever. It observed the entire prairie. And so it's kind of a unique way of presenting the story, our story of the 1950s, because we go beyond that in our book and talk about the story of the 1950s as well, not just what affected our family, but the story of the 1950s. On page 220, I'm going to extend that part where I talked about Dad having a small locker business. Dad was a peddler. He was a peddler. And I say in the book that Dad was a natural born peddler and delivered our farm fresh eggs to all strata of society. Even North Dakota Governor John Davis enjoyed eggs laid by our chickens. Dad and he had been boyhood friends on the prairie. Then their lives meandered in different directions in their teen and young adult years. One chose the path of speaking for the people, such as Governor Davis. The other, such as Dad, chose to feed the people. Be that as it may, they became reunited due to one common denominator: our farm fresh eggs. So, Jackie, we had a hand in that as well, because, of course, the chicken shores were not just designated for mom and dad. It was a family affair, and we all reaped the benefits of money that was returned from the sale of those eggs and the sale of those processed chickens that we had. But I do remember Dad loving to be a peddler. Do you remember that, Jackie? How he just
Oh
sold?
yes, he was filled with joy all the time, but especially when he could be peddling, talking to his clients, and he was just a fun guy to be around. And so he would chat with them for a little bit, then he'd rush on to the next one.
Well, he wore overalls all the time, bib overalls. He wore the blue ones for working on the farm and going to town to deliver eggs. He would wear his blue and white striped ones, and of course, in that upper pocket, he would keep his little binder. It was like a little three ring binder, and there were pages in there for each customer who chose to pay on credit rather than cash the day of delivery. And there was so much trust between the customers and Dad, because
Mhm.
oftentimes he would just go into people's homes. The door was unlocked, and he'd leave their eggs, their weekly order of eggs, in their refrigerator, and he'd leave, and they may not have had the cash laying out there for those eggs. And so he'd write down in his little book what
Mhm.
who owed what, and usually by the end of the month, then these people would pay Dad. But not only did he that was that influential for me to see that and the trust that was built up between Dad and his customers, but it was also the fact that that Dad had this rapport with customers. The customers trusted him because of his kindness, because of his integrity. And it was just the way business was done. And then, of course, do you remember, Jackie? We'd sometimes help him. This would be more in the summertime. We would help him on his egg route. And when he delivered to the professional buildings in Bismarck,
Mhm.
we it was so fun because usually he had this big case of eggs, cardboard case of eggs that might have had about 13 dozen in it. Then mom had previously pre-wrapped individual dozens of eggs. And then you would carry some of those individual dozens. I would carry some of them. And of course, because I was littler, I didn't get too many. Probably 2 or 3 stack high was all I got to carry. But we got to follow Dad in that building. And one of the neatest things was to be able to ride the elevators and go up and down to those floors. We go into the different office buildings, and the greeting that would be given to Dad and to you and me was so welcoming. And of course, we got to see money transactions, because in the pockets of Dad's pants were his coins. They jingled a lot, and so consequently, if he needed to make change, we watched him take money out of his coins out of his pocket and make change. And that's one way too how we learned the value of giving a return amount of change in a transaction. And Dad always did that very jovially and very thankfully.
So that brings to mind, do you remember how much a dozen?
The last that I recall was 50 cents a dozen, but I think that was probably later in our life, maybe high school years, which would have been
That,
for me in the 60s. But I wouldn't surprise me if when I first recalled being involved with Dad and helping him on his egg route, that it might have been 35 cents or 40 cents a dozen.
well, you're correct in sort of in both. 50 cents for the large eggs, which we always had, and
Mhm.
35 cents for pullet eggs.
Oh, I
For the
forgot
pullet
about
eggs.
that. The
Yeah.
difference. Yes.
Mhm.
Did many people want pullet eggs?
I can't recall because there weren't as many,
Right.
but just remember 35 cents was the price.
Okay, sure.
And
Yes.
yeah, as those chickens matured, there were no more pullet eggs. They were large eggs.
That's right. That's right. And going on, Jackie,
Mhm.
I know we're talking about money, Mom and Dad provided for us very well. We never felt that we were wealthy by any means. We never felt that we were poor by any means. But one day you had a question for Dad about money. What was
I
that?
did. And on page 167, graph 2, I report that. And I say, or in the book, one time I asked Dad for an allowance. And he replied, "Why do you need an allowance?" He imparted that if I continued to work as a family member, he'd give me anything that I might need. I deciphered the meaning of the message as I'd be supplied with what I needed and not necessarily with what I wanted, and the subject was closed. On the other hand, Dad was always more than generous and fair, and sometimes I did receive a desired want. On the other hand, sometimes as time went by, I didn't want that want anymore. You know,
Mm, sure. Sure. It was a want for the moment, and then you
yeah,
realized that you really didn't need it when as time passed. Well,
yeah,
one thing that I remember too that we recorded in our book, and I believe you had recorded it, was about when, and I thought this tied in with an allowance too, about clothing to purchase clothing, and he said to you about sewing.
right. He did. And this
Okay.
was actually when I was older in high school. So he said I could have any amount of clothing I wanted, but I had to sew them.
Hmm.
So I just spent summer sewing clothes. Woohoo, free.
And we frequented those fabric stores in Bismarck a lot, didn't we? It
Mhm.
it was so fun to go into those fabric stores or the independent fabric stores. There were a few of them in downtown Bismarck then, but I particularly remember going into the basement level of J.C. Penney. They had a
Right.
huge fabric department, yard goods department. And it was as if the windows of opportunity were open to us because basically we could pretty much choose whatever fabric and pattern we wanted it to sew. Of course, mom gave us some guidance on how to do that, but it was a great learning experience to read a pattern, to know how much fabric yardage we needed for our particular size and particular design, pattern design on the folder, the pattern folder. But then we had to buy notions and thread and zippers and buttons. It was just a wonderful time, at least for me, to be immersed in how the value of learning to sew and how to create something from start to finish.
Exactly.
The very few times where did we get purchased clothing. And can you recall what some of those items might have been?
That were purchased. I
Hmm.
remember the first time I had a purchase dress. It was my mom and some other homemakers ladies went to a national homemakers convention in Minneapolis. And when they returned, there was this box from DeLaundrie's. And I opened it, and there was this beautiful dress. It was a plaid dress. It was cotton, and it was just my first one, so it was very memorable. And I believe you had a first one dress purchase dress sooner than I had, because
Well, because I was younger, and mom probably didn't want to show partiality. If you received one, I received one.
I see.
But tell our viewers about how our fabric allotment prior to being able to go into fabric stores and purchase fabric.
Well, we often would get chicken mash, chicken feed from PV Elevator.
Hmm.
And in those days, in the 50s, the contents of the feed was in cotton sacks. And so when we went to the elevator to pick out the mash or the feed, we were actually picking out fabric for our next dress or skirt or whatever.
And these
They
weren't
had beautiful fabrics.
Yes, they weren't white cotton sacks. There were some beautiful prints on these
Hmm.
sacks, and there were a variety of them. That was like a mini fabric store going to the elevator to get chicken feed, but
Yeah.
yet it was multi-purpose. And of course, that was uh, what's the word I want to say? Reusing of
Repurposing.
yeah, repurposing those sacks for
Yeah.
a better use
Yeah.
after all the feed had been fed to the chickens. It was fun. I remember that as being a fun thing. But I, I know it was not always the best memory, perhaps thinking that, oh, you were wearing a feed sack. But mom was in her days was so capable of creating beautiful garments out of little or nothing. She was
Hmm.
a very gifted seamstress, and so dad married a great woman there who really bonded well with him, and they were able to provide for us very well.
Right. So we learned many, many lessons from our parents.
Hmm.
And one of those lessons, I guess maybe that's one of the things that carried over from my childhood, and that is Dad taught us the value of caring for your possessions, your
Hmm.
tools and machinery, the animals and the buildings, and so much more. And he taught their proper care. And for instance, I think about Dad every time I am using a shovel or a trowel, and then I'm thinking about Dad because it's very important to not put that equipment away with soil on it because the soil contains moisture and moisture rusts a shovel, for instance. So I always clean my equipment, my utensils, whatever I'm working with, because that is being a good steward.
Hmm. I think that those habits came about because of the Depression days when you had to be so concerned about your possessions and the reusing of them. But I do think that a lot of those habits, such as caring for equipment, were taught by dad's parents to him and by mom's parents to her. It was just the way things were done. We didn't live in a disposable society
Right.
back then. And I can recall mom even when we'd have a piece of chewing gum, she would say, "Now, remember?" Because that was when chewing gum, sticks of chewing gum came in a aluminum foil
Like
type
a
wrapper.
foil. Yeah.
Yes, but there was a wax type of paper finish that was between the stick of chewing gum and the aluminum foil. So she taught us how we could separate that piece of waxed paper from the aluminum foil backing and save that aluminum foil backing in case we needed it for something else. That came, I believe, because of the Depression days and
Right.
how they learned to be such savers and be thrifty users of what they
But
had.
can you ever think if we ever do anything with that aluminum foil?
No, I think I can recall
Gee,
making a little ball
yeah.
of it, but I don't know what it would be used for.
Well, that it may it they must have used it. They donated it to some war effort. I don't know.
Oh,
And
mhm,
also, washing out plastic bags to be
mhm,
used. That
mhm,
was
mhm.
something we did.
Bread
Yeah.
bags, even though we didn't buy bread, very seldomly, mom would bake her own bread. But when we did, there were those plastic bread bags came
Right.
about, and definitely we would wash them, and then she would reuse them. Once she baked bread, she would put her baked and cooled bread in those bags and put them
Mhm.
into the freezer.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
One thought
go.
I had about the aluminum foil balls, and during the depression time, that was a Christmas ornament that could be made and put on the tree. It's just is put aluminum foil together in a ball with a little hanger on it of some sort and hang it on the tree and reflect the candlelight or
Mhm.
very much on the tree. So maybe that's what was being saved. The
Could
purpose.
be. Good.
Mhm,
Yeah. So Dad and Mom were conservative in that they taught us to take care of our equipment, our possessions. They taught us to not waste money, and they
mhm,
taught us about time. You just didn't lollygag around.
mhm,
Dad, before his arthritis slowed him down, would not walk. He would run across the yard, going from one task to the next. And there was so much to do during the day, and time was precious. And even today, I think both of us, when we have something across our yard, we just run because that's what we did
mhm.
and do still
That's
do.
right. That's
So
right.
and his time was precious, and I didn't feel that this was a disadvantage or I didn't feel put upon. I was able to help Dad. As I mentioned before, Dad was fun to be with, and he, uh, like when we were, for instance, we were cleaning the chicken house, and he'd be telling us stories of his boyhood, or he had a little, some friends who were kind of um, nuisance pickers sometimes. He told us one time when during a Halloween they tipped over a toilet and there was somebody in it, an
An
outhouse.
outhouse. Yes, an outhouse.
That wasn't so funny, but anyway,
Did they ever get caught?
I don't know. But he would laugh and laugh and laugh when he told his jokes, his funny
Well,
things.
well, we want our viewers to know that he wasn't a perfect man by any means. He had a lot of fun.
No, he was just a fun guy.
Yes, yes. The one thing that I can recall too is that when mom and dad had special gifts of singing, they had beautiful voices. A lot of times, even at breakfast time, the radio would be turned on to KFYR in Bismarck. That and Dad would sing along with the music, especially if there were hymns. He had this beautiful voice and kind of a baritone, and it was, I guess it just became part of life that he would just burst out in song every so often. But we went to the Minokan Methodist Church at that time. That was our early Christian education. And often, and of course, because it's a small community church, and the community was pretty much divided between Protestants and Catholics. There was a St. Hildegard's Catholic Church as well, and that is still going in the community. But we went to into Minokan to the Minokan Methodist Church, and mom and dad seemed to be the ones with the gifted voices and willing to share their talents for church services. So I'd like to read this that we took from our book. It happens to be on page 163, and actually we said this together as the sisters because we both felt this way. So let me see. Okay, occasion. Let's see. After. Well, you know what? I think I have the wrong page, Jackie. It talks about
63.
singing in church, but
Page 63.
63. Thank you. I was 100 pages ahead. Page 63. So, okay. Yes. I say, speaking of songs, occasionally mom and dad would sing duets in church. Their beautiful voices blended so well together. Mom was an alto, by the way. From the oak twirling seat, piano stool. Remember that piano stool seat and it just twirled and twirled. Carmen Owen, she was what? How much older than us? 6 years maybe older than you.
No.
Yeah. Yes. Well, anyway, she had taken piano lessons. Anyway, she was our church accompanist, so she would accompany dad and mom. The old rugged cross and In the Garden were favorites that they sang. As a little girl, I would sit next to Jackie on the hard wooden pew and listen with pride as my daddy and mama shared their gifts of music. None of our other neighbors and friends with whom we worshiped in the community shared their musical gifts as mom and dad had. And isn't it interesting, Jackie, how that imprinted on my mind? I have this visual in my mind. Up there we were sitting in this pew, the right-hand side of the church, about 3 rows back. And I can still see mom and dad up there singing and just feeling such warmth in my heart that those were my parents. And they were singing about Jesus. And I could be there to witness that. And, people, you never know what kind of impression you're making on your children, especially with Christian education. And it certainly has been a lasting impression in my mind, and one too that even I felt was important when our children were young, and so forth. It the, the lives of our parents are so influential in who we turn out to be. And Jackie, we had some great ones, didn't we? Our Jack and Eudora Pfeiffer were very special people in our lives, and we know they were within the lives of many. We are so blessed to have had them. They were gifts. And in summary, Jackie, do you
Mhm.
have something that you want to mention from our book?
I do. And both Janine and I feel this way. As little girls sitting on Dad's lap, we were surrounded by his arms and felt security and safely loved.
Hmm.
Securely and safely loved, just enrobed in love.
Hmm. And it wasn't. He had his way of showing that love to us, and Mom had her unique way of showing love to us. And today we happen to be honoring Dad because of upcoming Father's Day. We hope that you have enjoyed learning more about our dad, meeting him. And someday we would certainly love to know about your experiences in growing up in the 1950s. Now, we also realize too that Father's Day is upcoming in a couple of weeks, and there is still time to purchase our book, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. If you go to our website and you see that scrolling around the bottom of our screen, whilethewindmillwatch.com, you will be able to see a list of all the different vendors throughout the United States who carry our book. But if there is not a local vendor close by, please reach out to our distributor, which is the North Dakota State University Bookstore. You can order online there. They will send one or more copies of our book to you for gifting or for your own enjoyable reading. And remember, folks, it's a national award-winning book. It comes with a few perks to it, and we are so blessed with that. So please feel free to go to our website and order the book from there, especially if you don't have a local vendor at which you can purchase the book. Jackie, do you have anything more to say in summary today?
Well, about concerning Dad and Mom, we were
Hmm.
blessed and we are grateful.
Hmm.
But as far as housekeeping, I'd like to have you all look at the little red subscribe button, and please click on that one, and then also the thumbs up button. We'd appreciate having you do that, and join us every week for the 1950s Fun Chat. You
Yeah.
can get it on YouTube anytime after the Monday. It goes live Monday night at 8 o'clock Central. You can see it then or anytime afterwards. And it's probably very easy for you to find if you go to our website, because under 1950s Fun Chat, that section, right hand section way over on the right hand side, that's where you'll be able to get all of the previously recorded shows.
Yep, that's right. That's right. And so until next time, we want you to remember things of the 1950s. And for us, what stands out are malt shops. Not that we went to them, but it does stand out like that. Cool cars. There were a lot of them in beautiful colors. Rock and roll, of course. And just the fact that our small farming communities were wonderful areas to grow and to learn about life in America. So until then, we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
We appreciate and thank each and every one of our viewers.